لا معناها بالغلط هذا في كم بيبر بالغلط. Pass it. We still have time. We can have any entertainment during this 2-3 minutes. Okay. So we have 4 minutes according to my watch. قديش ساعة عندك أنت؟
55
معناها 5 minutes إلى. أوكي. أنت you are sure هذه صحيحة ماشية على الساتلايت؟
أنا عندي ماشي
55 يعني؟ خلاص هيفكس لأنه أنا yesterday I just corrected it on what was said in the plane. That whatever. So we will wait for 5 minutes. If you have any question extra outside the class now.
Doctor, did you send us any documents this week? Did you send us any documents this week?
No, but
You mean class documents, PowerPoint, anything?
I did send you the handout on PDF of session 3 and 4. This is the last thing I sent you.
3 and 4?
Yes,
I did not receive it.
I did send it. Anybody didn't
When was
receive
the
it?
last, you mean this week or last week?
No, last week, end of last week.
I did not receive it.
I didn't receive it. Just one.
Hmm?
I didn't receive it.
You didn't receive them? That means your email with me. So both of you come on here and see your email, please, and correct it if we have time now to do that. At least for the future, we can do that. What happened here? Oh, here. Okay, sorry. I will do what? And I'm having it ready to be used for the next. Now, see if your email is here and it is wrong, correct. Then I send it. Then
Check the
your
junk
email.
mail. You
Maybe
have
it
to
went
check
into the
the
junk.
check the junk mail. Yeah, maybe you'll find it there.
Come on here, please check your email if it's correct. You got them? Okay. So the last thing I sent to you is the, again, once more, the class guidelines and the student assignment, along with session 3 and session 4. So if you didn't receive these, it means there is a problem with the email. Okay, I tell you what, I think I can do that. Now, why do they put this in our way? We don't need it, and we didn't ask for it.
It's set by default in all classes.
Put their default in the fault. We don't want to be with us. Someone must have forgotten this somewhere. Okay. Next week we will have our exam. The exam will be in the first hour. We will complete our exam, inshallah, before the prayer. And after prayer, we have regular class. But the exam will be in 2 rooms. We will use this one and 04. Where is this 04? Just next door?
No, The one after.
Yeah, maybe 3 and 4. Yeah. Okay. So we'll use the 2 of them to spread you out. So the front and the back.
We missed the first lecture.
Okay. Well, it's bad luck. I'm sorry. I told you check with the IT or the recorder. It's being recorded,
I don't.
or maybe in the library.
After the session.
Either in the library, or is it in the library now available, or with the IT?
They said that will be on the library last Thursday.
Okay, I need to check. If it is not on the library, it is with the IT, so take it from them. Sorry for that, I mean, wasn't planned, but this is the way it happened. Sometimes, yeah, out of emergency only because of Dr. Kazim. And what we got as the news that Dr. Kazim was on his way coming here when he was called back for his son. His son got an accident, so he was called back and he emailed that he cannot come. So we hope inshallah his son will be okay. That's his only child anyway. So if anyone does not receive my emails, please check with me for whether your email with me is correct or not. Okay? So this is here, we can take it out. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We have today a presentation, but the person of the presentation hasn't come yet. We don't know if he will come or not. So we will discuss today session 3. I really recommend, please check chapter 3 on Al-Manhal, Islamic Finance Contract, chapter 3. We are following the same chapters in all our class. So there are many things in addition to what you find here. So probably we may miss some points, but that is more complete. So check it on Manhaj, just to be sure that we cover it. In the library. It's like access for e-books. They have the access, they give you the access in the library. And I think you can only see it in the library, you cannot see it outside.
No,
You can access from home? Excellent, if you can.
You can access easily.
Okay.
It has more than 1,000
Yeah. Our discussion today will focus on return in Islamic finance, and it's important. Now, one of the things that are usually said that the focus point or the focus issue in Islamic finance is the prohibition of riba. I don't believe that is correct. I think the prohibition of riba is not at all the focus of Islamic finance, because you cannot define a thing by what it is not. Riba is prohibited, so we don't give transactions based on riba. But you cannot define a thing by what it is not. Is as defining the wolf who did not eat Sayyidina Yusuf. All of them. So you can't really define it by what it is not. We need to define Islamic finance by what it is. And it is important to understand how return is earned in Islamic finance, and then we distinguish between the different approaches or different methodologies of finance. And last time, you remember, we defined finance and we expanded the meaning of finance. This expansion is very important because this is what we count on. What is interesting is to notice that while Sharia prohibits riba, it does not prohibit finance, and it does not prohibit earning through finance. So finance is something different than riba. Riba is one way of providing finance, but there are definitely other ways, and this is what we want to focus on in our discussion today, through trying to understand what justifies, how can we make money in Islamic finance. Okay, so let's take the essential characteristics of return in Islamic finance. It is, the first one is property based. That is the rule. If you don't own, you don't earn. You've got to own in order to earn. Today I was discussing with one of the colleagues statements that some of you may have heard of it, at least those who have Sharia background. Anyone with Sharia background here? Do we have anyone? You have Sharia background. Okay. You are the only one? Yes. You are also from Sharia? Okay. It's a statement attributed to Al-Kasani, I think in the 7th century. Al-Kasani. No, it was earlier, in the 4th century. Kasani. Hanafi, famous scholar, that earning can be in, or earning profit in either of three ways. Either by utilizing property or labor, work, or you earn by what he called daman, that is guarantee or liability or bearing risk one way or the other. So this statement has been all the time, as a matter of fact, misleading. And sorry to say it, there are many misleading things in our classical fiqh. We shouldn't take it without really thinking critically about everything. So we are not going to take. The only thing we will take without questioning are the texts that are قطعي الدلالة. The text قطعي الدلالة means that they have definite meaning that is not questionable or it can be quarreled on. Only these texts, their meaning will take it without discussion. But all other things, we will take them with discussion and with critical thinking, especially those that come after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even the Sahaba. And I mentioned to you, I think, didn't I, that book of Aisha. So please read that book. That helps us a lot. In fact, profit cannot be earned by daman at all. And Kasani is wrong in that claim completely. A profit can be earned by either providing work through labor, some kind of labor, because most kinds of labor entitles the provider of the labor to a wage, not to a profit. And probably we can easily know the difference, can we? The profit is something that is not predetermined, whereas the wage is predetermined. So I used usually the term return, that's why you have return here in Islamic finance, because we have the two kinds, profit sometimes and sometimes is a prefixed or non-prefixed, could be either way. So and we exclude the issue of labor completely because we are not talking, we are talking about finance, and in finance and finance contract, you provide property, you don't provide labor. So when we say mal, we mean property, including cash, but it could be any other thing. Okay, so the first and basic issue is that return in Islamic finance must be based on owning a property. Without owning a property, you cannot earn. And if we apply the rule, if we want to correct what Kasani said, we would make it that return is earned either by providing a property, mal, or by providing work. And work could be, since we said return, so return can be predetermined or not predetermined. In both cases, it applies. So return utilizing labor, all kinds of labor, whether managerial or non-managerial, prefixed or not prefixed, you may earn return, or by providing property. And of course, when we talk about finance, we are not talking about labor, so take labor out. In finance then, return can only be earned by owning a property. And we agreed that a property is more than cash. It's not money. It's more than money. Money included. And by the way, money included or is included only on the micro level. In other words, the money you own could be part of your wealth at the individual level. It is part of the assets also of a corporation or a bank. But for the whole society together, is money part of the wealth of the economy? No. Why? Not even the value of it.
Not the value of the wealth, it's a measure for
Money. Well, money. Is money part of the wealth of Qatar, for instance? All these riyals and 100 riyals that are in circulation, including current accounts in banks, are they part of the wealth of Qatar? As an economy, no, because they cancel out. The idea is that they cancel out completely. Whatever is owned by someone is debt on some others, including debt on the central bank. So it's not really part of the collective asset, part of the economy's wealth. But then Islamic finance, we are talking micro anyway, and in finance contract, the whole discussion is always on micro level. So you need to own a property in order to earn return. That condition goes all the way. No return can be earned without owning a property, as a general statement. And now if we discuss this from fairness point of view, do you see it fair, or you have anything with it? I mean, do you feel comfortable that it's natural that if you want to earn, of course we're talking about finance, you have to provide a property, an asset, goods, you buy goods and sell them, you make earning, you buy assets and lease them, you make earning, you make project and own machines and other things, and then create output products and sell these products, make earning, and in all these ways. Is there any other way to earn? And yes?
So if as an individual, if I put some money in one of the investment products for an Islamic banks, I'm getting only profit at this moment. But is the bank itself is doing this part for me, or?
Well, when you do that, what's the position of the bank toward this money that you invested with it?
I think it's investing it.
Simply your agent. Is simply your agent, and as an agent, whatever it does reflects on you. If it makes profit, you make profit. So he's using your property instead of you using it, because of many reasons. Of course, it's natural that there are people who don't know how to invest or don't have time to invest. So they assign that investment to some others. They have excess assets or excess properties, you put it in general, and they assign it to some others to manage it, to administer it, to call it invest it, and then they on agency basis. That being agent is as if you are yourself is the investor, or you are the investor.
If they provide the guarantee for the investment amount.
We will talk about it later, that there are different kinds of guarantees, and we will discuss these. But the idea here, if you don't own a property, you are not entitled to an increase. How do you get an increase without a property owned? Talking about finance, of course, you can sell your labor, that's a different issue, and get a return as price of the labor hours you sell. But in finance, is it not fair to say that if you don't have a property, you cannot earn? I think this is extremely fair. But again, we want to look at the other conditions and qualify this first statement. We can call it like the necessary condition, without which nothing, without which there will be no increment, because the increment doesn't come from the air. It has to come from a property, not from anything. Okay. It's a growth in a property, an increase in a property. Okay. The qualifying statements are that this property, maybe number 2, is, in my opinion, probably is the most important. That is, it has to be a property that can create or generate increases, an increment. If what you own does not generate increment, you cannot claim an increase in your assets. You cannot claim an earning. Okay, I mean, the simple example of it, if your cow doesn't give a baby cow, doesn't give birth to a baby cow, can you claim that you own a baby cow? But there's no, it's natural. So it's normal then. And it's the simplest and most far-reaching implication of the principle of justice, that if your property gives an increment, you earn. If your property doesn't give an increment, you don't earn. This is natural. If your cow did not give birth, if your lamb did not give grass, then you cannot claim earning. If your commodity that you own, if you didn't find a buyer to them, you cannot claim that you earn. And you can earn only if you find a buyer who will buy them for higher than the cost, of course. And that is the increment that you can make. Without that, you cannot claim owning of any increment. In other words, that should bring us to the principle of entitlement. You remember that to earn a new property, you can, one of the 6 ways of earning a property is by entitlement. Of course, inheritance is another way, which we mentioned earlier. Getting a gift from another person is also a way, but these others are not in finance. They apply in areas other than finance. But in finance, then, to earn, you've got to own a property, but that property must be also of special kind. That is the kind that is able to create increment. Are there properties that don't have this ability?
Yes.
What?
Religious buildings, like for example, masjid. It will never give me any.
We are going to charge on entering the mosque from now on. We could have done that.
We could have.
Okay? At least if you live in any community where the government does not support mosques or religious places, you know that you have to contribute. If you don't contribute, the mosque will close. So you, like in America, the mosque lives on the contributions of the people who pray in it. Otherwise, you cannot pay for electricity or cleaning or all other things, including the building itself. So we may charge for that. That's a different issue. It's not the that is the use of it here. But the building itself of a mosque itself is an asset that is able by its nature to generate income. You can rent some rooms in it or anything like that. But it is possible also to charge for entering the mosque. Okay, we don't feel it here because that doesn't apply. Okay, so the any example that is good example of a property that does not generate and cannot by its nature generate any return, cannot increase.
Are you selling cash or money?
Well, we mentioned cash provided it remains as cash. But there is another thing which is more important, that's the debt. Okay? The debt is an asset. It's a property. It's a real property, right? Or is it fake? Is it real property or it's fake property? It's a real property. Okay? So a debt is a real property, and it may be in kind or in money, in cash. Okay? So either way, the debt does not give birth to a baby. Debt does not generate increment by its nature, because of its nature. Okay, it's not because it is intangible, notice. How about a computer program? That's intangible property, right? Okay, so one who wrote it, who invented it, it's an intangible property, but that property is able to generate return. How does it generate return? By selling it to you or to others, and that saves your time. You are willing to pay for it more than its cost. In other words, it's not the intangibility of the debt that makes it unable to generate increment. It's its nature, because the debt is not only intangible, but also is unincreasable. How can it increase? I mean, how do you imagine a debt would increase without adding an artificial, and I'm using the word and I mean it, an artificial assumption? Let's assume it increases by 5% per year. That's only an assumption. Where does it come from? From your mind, mister. Maybe from the common jargon that we are used to it all the time, the Wall Street jargon, as they say. So because of that, being used to it does not really reflect, does not make it real. No matter. That's Abdul Qadir Hatim. Anybody heard of who's Abdul Qadir Hatim? Gosh, you guys are... You don't know our history. You should know our history. أيوة. Abdul Qadir Hatim was Wazir al-I'lam during Abdul Nasir, and his policy was that lie and lie and lie again. Sometime someone will believe you. But that doesn't really make the lie reality.
Turn into lie and lie and lie until you believe yourself.
Yeah. Probably you believe yourself, but nobody is going to believe you. Okay, so here, it's only an assumption. Think of it without the influence of this Wall Street jargon. How can a debt increase? Without adding an assumption. Let's assume it increases at 5%. And in fact, you need another assumption. Where do you get this 5%? Why not 4 or 6? Or we got it from Greenspan. Or from what was the next one after Greenspan, Bernanke. I didn't now remember the name of the lady. Now is a lady who heads the Federal Reserves in America that influences the rate of interest. So in other words, its rate, not only the idea of an interest, but also the rate of that interest will also add to that. needs another assumption. So you need two assumptions, as a matter of fact, not only one, to have an increment in a debt. And that assumption is fake, has no reality. This is why realism is extremely important condition in the Islamic finance.
In reality, debt could decrease, not increase. If we have some bad debts, it could decrease. So
Right.
it would generate a negative return.
Yeah, but we will not.
We will not define
Well,
it
I
as
wouldn't
this.
like to create a bad debt. Nobody would like to create a bad debt. Okay, but that's an idea. Yes, with time there may be more than one reason that it may decline. I thought you were going to talk about inflation. Definitely it declines through inflation, whatever it is. But sometimes if it is in kind, it may increase in price. So that's. But when we look at it at a debt, we look at it as it is. A debt of 1,000 kilo of corn cannot increase and become 1,001 or 1,010. Although its price may change up or down, that's irrelevant. We are talking about a debt of 1,000 kilo of corn. That what does not increase. Okay, and same thing, the debt of $1,000. The price of the dollar may go up or down, but we are talking about a debt of $1,000. That does not change through time. There's no reason that it may, real reason in real life that it may change through time. So the first characteristic of the asset must be a growable one, a one that by its nature may increase. The second characteristic should be a moral one. And that comes from, again, a general principle which is basically based on human rationale. How can you put a price on a thing that is harmful? Is it rational to put a price on a thing that is harmful? There was once a series of what they called in these episodes on TV. The title of it, اضربني وخذ دينارا, اصفعني وخذ دينارا. I don't know if you've heard of that. Probably you can check it. It may exist still on the somewhere on the internet. It wasn't a long time ago. It's just about maybe 25 years old. I remember, because at that time we were in Jeddah. Now time runs very quickly. We left Jeddah in 1999, so now we are 2015, almost 15 and a half years. We left in August. So I've seen that part of it more than one day. I think they used to put it, at that time they put it in Ramadan also. I mean, it's an interesting, more suitable for maybe younger people. But Isfani wa khudh dinaran. So this is, that's not normal, that's not natural, that's not a real thing in life. But the story probably, I don't remember anything from it. Probably I didn't even see maybe one episode, or even not one, all of it. But the idea is that if a thing that is harmful, it is humanly rational to say that it should not have a price. So when we say in Sharia that anything that is harmful, the pack of cigarette in the hand of your friend, if you throw it on the ground and smash it, that has no value. That's a reality, because you are at least reducing the harm that to which that friend is exposed. So you should be thanked for doing that, not definitely charged. Now, one thing we don't want to make a mix-up. You don't take the law in your hands. That's no doubt. You are not permitted to take the law in your hand, even though the moral law, but you cannot do it yourself, because the Quran repeatedly talks إنما عليك البلاغ المبين. So إن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر. Who cares? If you don't want to believe, you are the loser. So if you insist on not believing, then you are the loser. Why should I care about that? I do care humanly, but I tried. I did my best to show it to you. This is المبين. إيش معنى المبين؟ clear, right? يعني الواضح. المبين, you should explicate it in a clear way. Okay. So the point here, a thing that is not moral itself has no value and should have no value, and of course it cannot be a source of value creating because it is harmful. And we agreed that the criteria is really science, harm or benefit. Now the last point, there ought to be actual return. So if you make business with a partner and throughout the year you made all the effort, and at the end of the year you looked at your balance sheet again and you found that you made a loss, can you distribute profit to the partners? You cannot, because it's a losing result of those activities of buying and selling, etc. So these other three conditions, the morality, the growability, and the factuality, the presence of a factual return, these are the qualifying conditions of the return. The first one is the essential condition. We call them necessary and sufficient. The first one is the necessary condition without which there cannot be return whatsoever. But the others are also very important because they qualify the kind of asset that may give return. It must be by its nature growable. It must be moral, because any moral thing shouldn't have a value humanly, based on human rationale. But also the Sharia is very clear in this regard, definitely clear. Anything that is not morally permitted, morally acceptable, must have no value. And the only thing you do with it is waste it, throw it away, destroy it, and maybe so nobody can use it. You know that example, we mentioned it earlier, of that merchant who was one of the Ansar, one of the companions, who happened to have imported a shipment of wine, caravan of liquor from Sham, and he couldn't sell it. The Prophet ﷺ told him the only way is to destroy it. There is no other way at all to use it. Okay, so this is now, will tell us. Now if we take the issue of riba, where is the problem with riba? The basic problem is that you give a debt and the debt does not grow. So how come you can claim an increment? The increment in it is artificial, is fake, is not real, is only a claim, an assumption. And of course, if it is that way, it's not generated in reality. And this is clearly where the zulm in it. Is it not a kind of injustice? It's injustice. The first thing is with the truth. In reality, there is no increment generated, created by that asset. How can you attribute an increment to it? What kind of mind which accepts that attributing it, that, oh, there was an increment? No, the nature of that asset does not create the increment. Okay? We discussed earlier the issue of justice and what you lose and what when you give a loan, right? Did I discuss it in our last meeting, or probably in the first one? That is, when you give a loan, In fact, you are making a sacrifice, but that sacrifice that you are making is not an opportunity cost as claimed by many economists. Because what's the alternative of giving a loan? The alternative is keeping it in your pocket. There is also, of course, another alternative is to use it for any investment, and then you may lose or gain. It's not really that you always are going to gain. So it's not an opportunity cost. There is no cost for giving a loan. And it will be not rational. What's the meaning of not rational? It's a form of stupidity, right? That's what it means. I mean, clearly. Okay? It is not rational to give the loan out of the things you intend to use in investment or for any other uses that bring you immediate utility. So you don't give that loan usually from that. The loan is given, the alternative, the basic alternative of a loan is to keep the money in your pocket. And when you keep the money in your pocket, you don't charge opportunity cost to yourself, do you?
Doctor, this is between individual and an individual. It's not between an organization and individual, right? I mean, for example, as a bank, as a financial institution, instead of giving a corporate or an individual a financing, I mean, for example, take the cash and place it in a different place where I can earn some profit instead.
Or you may make some loss.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you may make some loss.
Yeah.
So it applies at the all micro units, and also in fact the macro also, but it applies to all of them. It doesn't matter whether a corporation or an individual, a legal or a natural person, really doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Because
so there is a cost behind
no, there's no cost. Well, this is what we want to notice. This is what we want to really make it, or try to make it at least clear.
But in
that-
life, we do charge customers for the cost of fund or the cost of cash, basically. This is the general fundamental.
Well, you do charge, and where does this charge come from?
Either transferring the funds from a place to a place,
I believe transferring a cost of transferring is something that is negligible.
Exactly.
That's not
It
what
can
we
be,
are
for example,
discussing.
that we are short of liquidity, therefore we are asking a third party to provide us with cash, and in this time charges will start.
And you pay this third party. That provide you with cash. Suppose it is a loan. Okay? This is
Yes.
what is practiced.
Yeah, this is
Okay?
what we practice.
So a loan, taking a loan is a debt. Does the debt generate any increment? It does not.
It does not, yes.
And it does not generate whether you are debtor or creditor.
But I'm taking the cash as a finance from a third party.
Okay? Don't mix these two together. Okay? You are taking a loan. And if it is a loan, does the loan transaction create any increment? That is the debt. It does not. Now, you may use that as a borrower, you may use that to buy other goods and services, and you have the possibility that you may be able to sell them at a higher or sell them at a lower price. It's possible, of course, all the time. So this is here where when you take a loan, the loan transaction itself, the loan contract does not create any added value. When you use the loan as borrower, okay, or before that, being under a loan, does that make any creation of added value? Or being owner of a loan? You could be under a loan or above a loan, say, and you are the creditor or the debtor. The fact that you own a debt on another, does that make the debt increase? Or the fact that you are under a debt to another, does that make the debt increase either way? No. What may make it increase is how do you use it? You may use it to make some profit, or you may use it and end up making loss. Correct? Okay. Now, the debt, what a debt can be used for. And if you own a car, you can drive it and go from places, between places, right? But if you own a debt, what can you do with it?
Like in Islamic way, we're
Islamic
not
or Kufranic? We are not talking about it doesn't matter.
Yeah, in conventional banks, we use usually debt to have more derivatives. Like we are trying to.
Yeah, but that's more fake.
Yeah,
That's another fakeness.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but what is done, and this is based on the same assumption that is not real, that it may create increment, but it does not. We don't want to go into what is called in logic around argument. You don't come back to the same point, because if the debt does not generate increment, it doesn't generate it also through derivatives, because itself is not able to generate that. Now, a debt, what can it be used for other than waiting until it matures and collecting it, right? Now, suppose the debt could be in physical items, not only in cash, right? Like 1,000 kilo of corn. Okay. Still, what can you do with it? You cannot, because it's a debt, like is a notion that is with the other. It's an interpersonal relation that does not have any ability to increase or change or whatever. Okay, so that remains as it is, whether it is in cash or in kind, it doesn't matter really. A debt does not grow by its nature unless you add other assumptions. So when you go to the bank and say put a deposit in a conventional bank for a year and they give you 2% addition at the end of the year, that is the assumption that we are denying. It is that 2%, what does it come from? Is it an increase in the debt, a real thing? Like exactly when you put some powder and with a dough and the dough grows larger and you make pizza? It's not. So it does not grow. The debt itself is not able to grow.
Yeah, so can we charge the loan a service charge, for example, for the person who wrote the papers and for the papers itself and for the whole transaction? I can put a service charge for the loan.
And then,
For example, 4%.
what do you mean by that? Why not 3%?
Or 3% or whatever.
Why not 1?
Whatever they could.
No, but what is it for?
A service
This is service charge. What is it for? I'm asking you because there was an attempt. In fact, this attempt was done twice at least in the history, modern history of the Muslim world. They used to call interest to either of two words, either riba, which is the word that is known anciently in the Muslim society, or they used to call it also fa'id. It comes the fa'id, and the word fa'id was very hated. So much. When banks came into Western banks, came into Istanbul, the first thing in the mid of 1800, 1850, 1855, Western banks started making branches in Istanbul and then spread from it to other cities under the Ottoman Empire at that time, or Ottoman state. They noticed that if they are going to charge riba or faiz, nobody will deal with them because that's something that is hated so much. So they invented the word fa'ida. And the word fa'ida is a beautiful word, in fact. What is wrong with fa'ida? It's something you benefit. It's a benefit. So it's good. It's a good word. But see, with time, the word fa'ida became exactly like the word riba. And people started again getting away from it because it is in fact riba. They understood the trick. In 1971, when King Faisal established in Saudi the what is called SAMA, Saudi Arabian Monetary Agency, as being the central bank of Saudi. One of the early things, because the decree that he issued, the idea is, whom are you fooling? The decree that was issued mentioned that one of the functions of this institution is to issue money and work as a central bank, etc., etc., and also to observe the prohibition of riba in the society, that no banks will deal with riba. And in fact, SAMA, one of the early things it did in 1971, it did eliminate all faida, because by that time riba was known as faida. So it eliminated from Saudi banks all faida. And it was so simple and so easy. They issued instructions to the banks: don't ever use the word faida anymore from now on. Use the word commission, umula. So if that's what you mean, we will call this service charge again interest. You see the point? If that's what you mean, we'll call it interest. Otherwise, if what you mean that sometimes, not sometimes, all the times, when we give a loan, there may be real expenses, out-of-pocket expenses that may be necessary, like recording it with a notary public, like having a writer, and many people don't know how to write. Suppose you are in an illiterate area, so you hire a writer to write it. And if you make it on a larger scale, you need even manager, you need the whole operation, and computers, and the place, etc., etc. Okay, if this is the cost, the real cost, which we call out-of-pocket cost, is what you mean, yes, this is chargeable to the borrower.
So the exact cost.
Exact cost, not an estimated one, even a real one. And usually in Islamic banking today, we call it, and you find a clause of that kind in contract, that which we will discuss it hopefully today, that out-of-pocket additional cost caused by the lack of payment or the failure to make payment that is due on a given time, this out-of-pocket additional cost is chargeable to the debtor. And you know why? You know where does that come from? It came from no less than the Quran itself. Have you read Quran?
Yes.
Do you know that there is a surah in the Quran called Surah At-Tawbah? If you look in it, in verse 90, and you will find a statement, مَا عَلَى الْمُحْسِنِينَ مِنْ سَبِيلٍ, that there is no way there should be burden, charge, cost, whatever you call it, the meaning of sabil. Yani anything. No burden, no charge, no cost, no pressure, no anything on al-muhsinin. And the qard is an act of benevolence, min al-ihsan. Therefore, you cannot, if there is any charge for it, any cost of it, who should bear it? Of course, the borrower, not the giver. Because the borrower is the beneficiary and the other one is the muhsin. The giver is the muhsin. So there should be no charge. So if you mean the actual out of pocket, yes, it is chargeable. Okay? No doubt about that. So here, the idea then, the debt does not create increment. And this is why, in fact, riba is prohibited. It's not fair. It's injustice by all kinds of injustice. First, injustice to the reality, because there is no increment created. And two, it is injustice between interpersons, because how do you take it and that we agreed on when you give a loan to another, and suppose that other person used that loan and bought any other item, and then when he or she sold that item, made additional profit, okay? Made increment. You got a loan of $1,000, you bought anything, and then you sold it for 1,200. Who owns this 1,200? This additional 200? The borrower, because the loan contract transfers ownership. So the borrower is the owner of the $1,000 when the moment he got it, and the borrower is the owner of the goods purchased with that money, and the owner is the borrower of whatever comes out of the sale of that goods. Could be less than 1,000 or more than 1,000, right? So he's the owner, and if he or she is the owner, by taking part of it, you are taking what? Part of the property of another person. Clear? Nothing else. And suppose that other person did not make increment, and there is a charge, 5% that interest that should be paid. And where does it come from? From his property. He has to sell maybe the jewelry of his wife, or sell his watch, or sell his iPhone, like many people here sell iPhone to buy cigarettes or to buy opium, okay, in the street. So he has to use, or in other words, you will be taking it from, in both cases, whether he makes return on using the money or not, you are taking that increment from the property of the other person completely, per se, not any other thing. And that is a big difference between them. So the point here then, these three conditions, the additional three conditions, describe the assets, and they are very important to justify return in Islamic finance, without which there cannot be a return. You cannot claim an increment. Now, let's take some false characteristics that are common among many people. That return should not be prefixed in Islamic finance. Where does it come from? They'll tell you, okay, I went to the bank and the bank is financing my car, and already the contract says, although the cost of the car is say 100,000, the contract says that the total amount I'm going to pay is 130,000, and that is fixed, predetermined. Okay? Anything wrong in that? Some people say, oh, this is like interest. So the answer is, so what? It is like interest. Anything wrong with that? No. What is wrong with that? What is the asset? Does the asset generate by its nature increments? It's a car. It generates utility. So it generates increment by its nature. And then it has, it may be prefixed. Prefixing or not prefixing is not an issue in Islamic finance. And on the internet, and I'm sure in books, also many books. And sorry to say it even, I'm going to say it frankly, some of my colleagues even here may tell you in other classes that prefixing of the return is not correct in Sharia. No, it is in fact correct in Sharia. There is nothing in Sharia by the Prophet ﷺ or in the Quran against prefixing. Rather, we have prefixing that is required in Sharia. Can you guess? And it came, zakah? No. Prefixing of return. We are talking about return in Islamic finance. Prefixing, for instance, prefixing the rent. When you rent an asset, renting an asset gives you a return. This is a form of return. Is prefixing necessary in it? That at the time of the contract you have to determine the amount of the rent for the whole period of the contract. not even for part of it. It must be for the whole period of the contract. It must be determined, and guess what? Can you guess where does that come from?
Not determined, it will be gharar.
Of course, if it's not determined, it will be gharar. But who said that it has to be determined? Where do we get that idea from? It has to be determined in the contract that is at the beginning of the finance. In other words, it has to be prefixed. Where does it come from? No less than the lawgiver, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In one of the ahadith, he said that the compensation in ijara must be determined at the time of the contract. So this is from the Prophet. Of course, in sale, when you buy an item for 1,000 and sell it, okay, and you intend, of course, to sell it for a profit, when is the price determined? At the time of sale, right? So that's at that time that you determine the amount of profit, because the profit is part of this of the sale price. It's the difference between the sale price and your cost. So it is determined then at the time of the contract. So prefixing is a thing that is Sharia compliant, completely depending on the nature of the contract you have. There's nothing with prefixing. Those people who object to prefixing, they have in their mind one way of giving financing. That is, you give financing on partnership kind. But that's not the only way of giving financing. We agreed that giving finance means provision of goods, services, and cash or means of payment.
Therefore, can we make an interpretation in a different way that the prefixing here is mentioned or meant by prefixing certain rate regardless of the property or the value? Like what is done in the commercial banks or conventional banks, when you know that the borrowing rate, if you borrow any amount of money, you will pay 5% interest. So can we limit the concept of prefixing here to the percentage?
Suppose we make the interest variable, and most banks do that nowadays. The interest rate, we make it variable. Does that make it permissible? No. So what makes interest haram? It's being an increment in a debt, not it's being fixed or variable. Variation or fixation is not an issue.
If we take it from the depositor point of view, I'm going to deposit my money in the bank, and the bank will be my agent to work on investing and utilizing this money to generate returns. But the bank is telling me that the return rate will be prefixed between 2 and 3%. Will this be the case?
See here what you said. I give it to the bank and the bank is my agent. What does that mean?
It's agency.
And means what? What is the implication of agency relationship between a principal and an agent?
Service.
That whatever the agent does reflects on the principal. So if the profit that is generated in that activity is 5%, the 5 is yours. And if it is 1%, the 1 is yours. And if it is -%, then you made a loss. So where is then that fixation? In agency. Now if it's not agency, in conventional banks, you give the money to the bank in time deposit. On what basis? Is it agency? What is it then? Loan. Loan. You give it as a loan.
Depository.
Hmm?
Depository days.
Yeah, the deposit. What's the definition of a bank deposit? Is a loan. Okay? So in conventional banks. So the bank deposit is a loan. You give a loan. A loan is a debt. So we are back to square one, where a debt does not generate any increment, and if the conventional bank says, okay, there is an increment of 2% on it per annum, that increment is in reality fake, does not exist in reality because the debt does not create that increment. So we are back to the injustice of the debt. Okay? So agent or not agent makes a difference. Now, the second point is it should not be also, it is said in the literature, should not be a percentage of the capital. And you find it in many Islamic finance contracts also. They are afraid of saying that in Murabaha, for instance, that the price is cost plus 7%, which is the rate of markup, and then they, instead of saying that, they calculated and say the price is 107. Instead of saying the price is 100, which is the cost, plus 7%. And you find it in many countries. See here, we didn't say it's percentage of capital. So hell to it, why didn't you say that? What is wrong in saying that? There is nothing. And in fact, even here in Qatar, you find that they hide the percentage. Why are you hiding the percentage? There is no reason at all. And you can say it only that the price is the capital I paid plus the markup rate, 7%. And that's enough. We know both. There is an attachment that says the capital, the pro forma that is attached, say the capital, say for that car is 100,000. So that means the sale price is 107. And that's enough to say. You don't need even to say that equals 107 or hide the 7% completely, as many contracts do that unnecessarily, because we are afraid that we are using a percentage of capital. It looks like interest exactly. So what? Yes?
Doctor, because they say that it's an administrative expenses, they mention this cost as an administrative expense. So it shouldn't be changed. If you are giving a loan by 100,000, it's the same for 2,000.
Okay. Let's see. Here, no. Are you talking about conventional banks or Islamic banks?
Islamic banks.
No, Islamic banks don't say this administrative expenses. Islamic bank clearly they say that this is a markup and it includes a profit, clearly. But let's make the point clearer, and please, again, that refers to what you raised confusingly. Let's make the point clear. You go to a bank, conventional, and you want to finance anything. They'll tell you the interest rate is say 6%. What is this 6? Where does it come from? What are the components of this 6? Okay? It consists of 4 elements. Here. Okay? This 6% consists of 4 elements. Okay? Where do you put it here? Element number 1, cost of administration. In order to operate the bank, we need 1.5%. If we don't get this 1.5%, we cannot pay salaries and other expenses. Okay? So this is one element. The second element is the inflation. Inflation, of course, expected inflation. We expect inflation rate will be 2% per annum, so we add 2%, because if we don't add this, we'll end up losing. Okay? Because the $100 we give you today will not be equal to the $100 there. We need 102 to compensate for the 100 of today. This is inflation. Number 3, we have risk premium. Risk premium. Now, risk premium, that varies between X and Y and Z, the customers. A customer may have more risk or less risk, and let's suppose in this case the risk premium is 0.5%. Okay? Notice the total of these is 4%. Then there is some fourth element that they call it cost of money. Sometimes it's called, this is two here, sometimes cost of money is called price of money. Okay. Now in this here, which one really in economics, which one is the interest of these? It's only this amount. It's cost of money. Let's make an experiment. And suppose, how many people now we are here? About 20, less than 20 hours. Okay, that's 5 and 9, and here's 10, 22. Okay, 21. Okay, so we are 21. Let's suppose we make an association, okay, to give loans to ourselves, helping each other. Each one of us pays 1,000 riyal in this association. Okay, and we start giving loans. Whoever among us who needs any help, we give him. Like many people in offices, they make each month they give one of them. Right? That happens. Many of these are done. Okay. Now this association, and we made it like say a waqf that continues for 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. Okay. Now this association, can it charge cost of administration? So we need accountant, we need other. Of course we can, and that's permissible in Sharia. How about the inflation premium? What will happen to this money after 5 years at an inflation rate of 2% per year? In a few years, we will lose all this money. Okay, so we have to charge really inflation premium. Otherwise, the money that we put, the waqf will die out. We'll have no more fund, right? With time, be eaten by inflation. And you come to take a loan, it will be whatever. We give you $1,000 loan or 1,000 riyal loan, and to you it's worth nothing. You cannot pay for the taxi to come and take it, right? So we need to really take care of the inflation. How about the risk of default? This is the risk premium, and that varies from one person to another depending on whatever collaterals we have, whatever the percentage we expect of default. Can it also be charged? Definitely there will be some default. Some of us may default. Okay, lose job and then not being able to pay. What can you do? Or a person dies and not leaving sufficient estate to collect from. There is a risk of default. Can we charge for that? Yes. So in other words, when we talk about interest, we really mean only this. Cost of money. This is what is not fair. This is what is not a cost. You see, these other three are really cost of the operation. But this one is not. This is an increment of a debt. And this is what is interest. Okay? These other three are okay and can be charged. But let's suppose you go to the bank and the bank tells you, okay, well, these other three really are okay, but, well, I'm lumping them all together, and the total, the amount we charge you is 6% per annum. Okay? What is this 6%? Can you define it? Increment in a debt, right? So it is all haram. Because all is increment of a debt. If we break it down, can we break it down and find some elements in it, in fact, are not increment in a debt? Can we make them not as increment in a debt? Now, do I know in advance the administrative cost? I don't. No matter how my calculation is accurate, I may end up during that year that one of the employees resigned and the other kind of distribute his work in between, and we didn't hire another one instead. We did away with it. We were able to handle it. Or we got a new computer program that saved us a couple of employees, and we laid them off, and we replaced them by that new program of computer, which cost us maybe 5% of the total of their salaries. So this cost, we don't know in reality what is it. Same thing for inflation. We don't know in reality. This is expected inflation. And same thing for the risk. All these are expected. Can we do in this association that we created here, 21 of us together? We created it, we said, and we want it to be permanent. We don't want the money to evaporate with time through inflation and through cost and through default risk. Okay? Is there any way which is really Sharia compliant? Can we do that? How about we calculate at the end of each period, since we know each other now, we calculate at the end of each period, say our accounting period is each 3 months. Exactly, we look at the inflation, what exactly happened, we look at the risk, what has happened exactly during this period, and also at the administrative cost, add them together, say in 1 year, we found that these 3 elements are 3.75. And we tell you, come on, Mr. Borrower, pay 3.75 this year. Next year, when we calculated them, was 4.01. So we ask you to pay 4.01 and so on. Real cost, real out-of-pocket cost can be charged to the borrower. And that we can charge it as a real cost. Now with time, this waqf is going to stay for say 100 years or more than that, hundreds of years. So all of us may not be there. Then there, okay? And people will not know each other. They grow up in number, etc., etc. So we cannot really predetermine the trust. Okay? Can we, the moment you come to take a loan from this cooperative, we tell you, okay, well, listen, our estimation for this year of the increment of these 3 elements is 4%. Okay? So pay now the 4%. Pay it now, but it will be subject to adjustment at the end of the accounting cycle, and we will refund to you any extra, or we may ask you to pay if there is any shortage. Would that make it permissible? Would that keep, here we called it all interest, but would it remain here when it is 4% all interest and 4% only paid, subject to adjustment according to the real out-of-pocket cost of the transactions? It can be. In fact, we can make it, and it won't be interest at all in a loan. Talking about loans here. Of course, when we talk about Islamic finance, now we are not going to talk about loans, because in loans you don't make money. And we are talking about finance that makes return. So we don't want really to keep in our minds the idea of loans. We want to keep in our minds the idea of making money out of these returns. Now, the Imam there, he put a note that Maghrib prayer will be immediately after the Adhan. No waiting at all. I think the Adhan is, the time is in, isn't it?
Yes.
So should we go for the prayer? And I know the distance is a bit far here, but I'm going to ask you to please come back at 5 minutes after. So we'll take 22 minutes. Is it okay? So please, 22 minutes. we will start inshallah in 22 minutes, even though I need to make the room myself. Okay? So we'll come back for, we continue. Your turn should be coming. We'll give you the last 15 minutes. Okay?
Yeah, you were jumping.
Really difficult in the evening too.
Who determines this mix? Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, right? We bring a dictator to determine how many people will take finance on creating debt, and how many people will make musharaka and mudaraba and whatnot. No, it's the market that determines it, no dictator. Okay, so we will not bring another dictator for Islamic finance. It is the market that determines it. The next one also, it's funny, and many people believe in that the source, where did they get the money from? If a conventional bank offers an Islamic, a Sharia compliant contract, is it okay to deal with it? Is it okay to buy a car, say, through a conventional bank if it accepts to give you finance on murabaha? Yes, it is okay. Where does it come? Where does it get its money from? Is none of your business. Why are you poking your nose in other people's business? We are not allowed, in fact, in Sharia, to poke our nose in other people's business. Probably some of you may remember that story when Umar ibn al-Khattab closed the mouth of Ibn Abbas. Abdullah ibn Abbas was a young man walking the street. They got some splashes from the upper story. You know, they used to build 2 stories even at that time in Medina. I remember at the time of Hijrah, at the beginning, the Prophet ﷺ was asked to live in the upper floor. Then he opted to move to the lower floor. And in the upper floor was living, what's his name, the companion who hosted the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Okay? So some water was splashed from the upper floor. And Abdullah ibn Abbas wanted to know whether it is okay, this water, or what. So Umar ibn Khattab told him, none of your business. Consider it clean anyway. Unless you know it is wrong, you have a smell, you have something that is clearly bad in it, just consider it clean. That's the way. So don't complicate life for us. It is, we don't ask, we don't poke our nose in the other business. I know, for instance, an Islamic housing cooperative in America, in Northern California, that refused to take financing Sharia compliant from Freddie Mac because the source of fund is, they got their fund from interest. So what? As long as you get financing according to Sharia, and you give financing, you expand, you help people more. And look at it from another angle. If a conventional bank uses some of its funds in providing Sharia compliant contract, wouldn't the lesser of an evil? I mean, the alternative is to use all its funds on interest basis, right? So if it assigns part of them to be given on Sharia compliant contracts, wouldn't that be better? It is better. You are reducing the evil also. It's lesser of an evil. So it's not, all these you find them unfortunately by many people, and we should be aware of them. The issue of risk. Is taking risk better in Sharia? Some people think that you should take risk. Islamic banks, tell you, okay, another story. We were in 2010 in a conference, public conference in New Delhi, and about 60-70% of the people in that room, about maybe 400 people were non-Muslims, all professionals, and we were talking about Islamic banking. A young man asked, we were four on the podium in kind of symposium way, and a young man asked, well, Islamic banks, most of what they do is financing on sale basis and ijara basis. Is that permissible? Well, good brother of mine who was sitting beside me, and good writer, known writer, has several books on Islamic economics and Islamic finance. His immediate answer was, this is why I call them non-Islamic. Islamic banks, non-Islamic, that's too much. That's quite too much. I had to interfere. And I spoke for about 15 minutes until everybody was applauding, alhamdulillah. And I made it clear that no, if they give financing on murabaha, rather this is better for the depositors. It is wrong for an Islamic bank. And I do object, honestly speaking, I do object for any Islamic bank when it gives financing on mudaraba or musharaka, because the risk involved in it is high. And who is put to that risk? Who is bearing that high risk? Depositors, right? Of course. Because what is the source of funds in an Islamic bank? 60% of it comes from depositors in mudaraba accounts, and about 30% from current account, again deposits, but they are current account, and about 10% is the equity, the capital of the bank. Okay, so you are putting too much risk on your depositors. That's incorrect. That is not fair. That is, in my opinion, a violation of the principle of agency. You, as an agent, you are required to protect your depositors, your principals. If you don't give them sufficient protection, you are betraying the agency contract, the wakala. Okay? Now, many economists, unfortunately, think that Islamic banks are wrong because they depend mostly on murabaha and sale and the like. But I believe this is the good thing Islamic banks do. This is not at all the bad thing. This is the good thing, rather. And I do object to any Islamic banks giving financing on mudaraba or on musharaka, because mudaraba is even the worst, because mudaraba means a sleeping partner. I mean, you don't know what's going on, and you have to come back only at the end of the accounting period and tell, well, how much is the profit, or we made a loss, or whatever. It's wrong. It's too much risk. Musharaka has lesser risk because you are insider. You sit on the board and you can interfere in the decision making. In mudaraba, you cannot. So is there anything in Sharia that taking risk is better? Recently, Hussein Askari in Georgetown University wrote a paper that, the sukuk are wrong because mostly are based on ijara and they should be based on risk sharing, mudaraba. Why? And he is wrong, Hussein Askari, in that. I was invited to give a lecture through the internet to students in the same university by another professor, and I showed them that this is wrong. It is not, there is nothing in Sharia at all, that sharing is better. As a matter of fact, if you want to argue on the basis that many fuqaha, especially fuqaha, like that kind of argument, looking at the text and playing with text, like sometimes even not really a good play. Look at the Quran. What does it say about when it talks about riba? What is riba compared with? Bay'. It's not compared with musharaka or mudaraba. As a matter of fact, the word partnership is not looked at favorably in the Quran. Okay? The word sharika, musharaka, whatever, mentioned in the Quran in 4 occasions. One, إن كثيرا من الخلطاء ليبغي بعضهم على بعض. خلطاء means shuraka. So يبغي بعضهم على بعض. This is negative. Another time is also negative. فيه شركاء متشاكسون. Again negative. A third one is obviously negative, which is the shirku billah. Again negative. One time, one place only, it is mentioned that this word sharika without being negative. Just in a neutral way, where it says فهم شركاء في الثلث ولا امرؤ مات وله إخوة فهم شركاء في الثلث. So this is here neutral. All other 3 places are negative. I don't give that argue any value, but this is the argument for those people who claim that no, you should go in musharaka and take risk, and that has no base in Sharia at all. Okay? Now there is one thing that needs really to be noticed. That is, when you own an asset, are you taking risk or not? What do you guys think? When you own an asset, are you taking risk?
Yes.
You are. Because this asset that you own may fall down and break, for instance, or its value may go down or anything. So ownership itself entails a risk. And let's take the incidence of al-kharaju bid-daman. A man bought, this is a hadith, a correct hadith. A man bought a sheep, a female sheep, and the seller had not milked it for several days before that. So its milk was really full milk area, and when the buyer thought that it gives a lot of milk, he milked it the first day, and of course he got all that much milk. Second day, the quantity of milk was very small, and same thing, third day was even smaller. So he went to the Prophet ﷺ that this man kind of cheated me. The Prophet ﷺ ordered him take the sheep back and give him the money. So the seller said, how about the milk he got? Shouldn't he pay me for the price of the milk he got? The Prophet's answer ﷺ was, al-kharaju bid-daman. So let's look at this meaning. What is the meaning of al-kharaju bid-daman? And similar to it, al-ghulmu bil-ghurm. There are 2 kinds of risk associated with owning a property. One kind is what may happen to that property itself. It may fall down and break, or its value may decline. So this risk is related to the property itself. It may not be usable anymore, whatever that happens to the property itself. You own, say, a computer program, and another computer program, more advanced, came in the market. Your computer program becomes zero. Nobody would buy it from you. So this is what happens to a property itself. There is another kind of risk, that you own a property and the market price goes down. So you produce, say, wheat, but in that season the market price of the wheat was very low. So you didn't make it. You didn't even got compensation for the cost you paid. So that is another, that we call it a price risk. Again, there is a liquidity risk. You own a property and you need cash, and nobody accepts to buy it from you. Even if you lower the price. That happened in 2008, when prices went down about 55%, but there was no buyer. Nobody accepts to buy them even at 55%. 5% in the stock market and in the bonds market, especially the bonds, and nobody would like to buy them. Okay, people were afraid. So there are three kinds of risk. Ownership risk. What happens to your property in a physical or quasi-physical sense? This we call it ownership risk. You have another risk that is also associated with owning an item, that you may not find the price of it goes down, and if you want to sell it, you'll have to sell it at a loss, at a lower price risk. And you have the liquidity risk. You physical asset and you need cash, you don't find a buyer. Okay? Now which one of these that relates to al-kharaju bil-daman? Al-kharaj means the return in the full sense. The man got the milk of that sheep. And the Prophet ﷺ told the seller, al-kharaju bil-daman, that you have no right to that milk, to that return during these 3 days. Who was the owner of the sheep during these 3 days? What do you think, Ya Dusuk?
I think the new owner.
The buyer
Yeah,
was the
buyers,
owner.
yeah.
Suppose on the second day the sheep dies. Who will be the loser? The buyer. The seller wouldn't lose anything because he gave the sheep and it was okay, and it died in the hand of the buyer. So this is the daman that this hadith refers to. And this is a daman of what? Damanul milk. That is ownership risk. This is the risk to which the purchaser was exposed, that if it dies during this period, it will die on him. If it fall down and break its leg or foot, who will be the loser? Even if you return it, you have to reduce the price now, because it's now worth less. The owner at that time is the one who loses. There is another hadith exactly similar, or another incident, probably the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that thing twice, the same sentence, and the sentence is so simple, al-kharaj bil-daman, it's very reasonable that it would be repeated more than once. Another hadith exactly similar to that, the Prophet ﷺ bought a craftsman slave, and the Prophet, one of the companions bought a craftsman slave, and that slave was, working and producing every day work, suppose shoes maker or whatever. So, by the way, today we call professional. And professional, we consider it a good word now. That those we are, for instance, are called professionals here. So we are kind of higher level. Of course, there is a level, they call it management, above. But professionals in all companies are the good ones. The word profession, mihna, is derived from the word imtihan, or from mihna bima'na, look down on it, al-imtihan. For the Arabs at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, anyone who is professional means he is a low class in the society, and usually professionals are only the slaves. So that slave was professional, not as we looked at them today, okay? Like doctors are professionals now today, and lawyers in America. And these are the two categories that make higher income than all others. So these are called professional, but at the time of the Prophet, those professions were the bad ones. All these professions were not looked at with honor. So that slave was professional slave, and he produced during these few days. And then after a few days, the Prophet, the buyer, found that there was a defect in that slave, some kind of physical or mental defect, probably. So they came to the Prophet ﷺ, and I told him, he sold me this without telling me that it has this defect. So the Prophet ﷺ, same way, ordered that contract to be void and asked him to return the price. Again, asked him, well, how about his product during these few days? The Prophet ﷺ told him, he earns the product because he is the owner, because he bears at that time the risk of ownership. Here, unfortunately, most fuqaha did not get the message clear. And based on that, many of the Islamic economists and Islamic finance people who write in Islamic finance, again, got the message in a very wrong way, thinking that this daman here is risk-taking. This daman here is not risk-taking. This daman here is the daman of ownership. That is, if you own a thing, you are exposed to the risk to which that thing is exposed. You may lose if it breaks. You may lose if it falls down. You may lose. Suppose that slave dies during these few days, the purchaser will be the loser. So daman is exposure to risk of ownership. In Ibn Nujaym, in his book Al-Ashbah wal-Nadha'ir, distinguishes between two kinds of daman. One kind, he called it daman al-mutlafat. That is, if I am riding a horse and my horse kicked the sheep of my neighbor and the sheep fell down and broke its neck, who will be required to compensate? I destroyed that property. Who is required to compensate? The owner. I mean the destroyer, the injurer. Here, this is daman al-mutlafat. This is different from daman al-milk. Daman al-milk means the risk of ownership. If you own a thing and anything may happen to that property, you will lose whatever that happened. Okay? So you will be a loser. Unfortunately, I was writing a paper with our colleague, my colleague Dr. Muhammad al-Jammal. Recently, we are writing it for the coming meeting of the OIC Fiqh Academy. And we noticed, while writing that paper, that in the 4 schools of fiqh, and I'm sure the Ja'fari school is like them also, in all of them, if a thief, suppose a person stole $1,000 from you, and then he used this $1,000 simply, suppose, put it in an Islamic bank and made 4% return on it. And it was discovered a year later. Okay, so he got $40 on that amount. When he was discovered, okay, of course, the money was taken and given to the true owner. In the 4 schools of fiqh, they say this $40 will be earned by the thief. I mean, he's a thief. Why? Because, of course, the money he took, he has a daman on it. He is required to return that money, and whatever happens to it, he is required, even if he lost, he is required to return the $1,000. Or if it was, say, a sheep that he stole, then he's required, even if he dies, he's required to return a sheep like it exactly to the owner. So he took a sheep or any other property, a desk, a computer, whatever it is, he's required to return. This is daman al-mutlafat. So in the 4 schools, and most likely also in the Ja'fari, we didn't check the Ja'fari school, we checked the 4 schools, they say that the thief earns the $40 because he has daman al-mutlafat. And they use this hadith, al-kharaju bid-daman, So he has the man, he earns it, halal for him. In the Hanbali school, there is another opinion which is the stronger opinion in Hanbali. They say, well, how come? He's sinful and we give him reward above his sin? We shouldn't, because he is sinful, we cannot give him that reward. So the $40 cannot be his, should be given to the owner. In other words, the three schools are wrong because they mixed up ضمان الملك with ضمان المتلفات. Ownership risk with ضمان المتلفات, which is the guaranteeing whatever you injure others, the result of injury. The Hanbali school gave the wrong argument. They shouldn't give the argument that, oh, we don't give to him a sin and a reward together. Well, they should have said he doesn't deserve it because he does not own it. If he owns the property, he deserves the increment. But if he doesn't own a property, how come he can deserve it? The Hanbali school, the more common opinion in the Hanbali school, again wrong, because he did not give the right argument. The right reason should be because he is not the owner. To whom this $40 extra belongs? The owner. Definitely not to the thief, because he is not the owner. This should be the reason. In other words, this ba here, al-kharaju bil-daman, is not a causality ba, يعني مش ba السببية. It's not a causality ba. This ba here is an association ba. ba المصاحبة. يعني مثل when you go on travel. If I tell you بالسلامة, is salama cause of the travel? No. I tell you بالسلامة means مع السلامة. The باء المصاحبة in the Quran, for instance, ادخلوها بسلام آمنين. Is ادخلوها because of salam? No. ادخلوها with salam. That's the meaning of this ba. So ba in Arabic comes as ba al-musahaba, they call it. And this ba al-musahaba here is ba al-musahaba, not ba al-sababiyya. It's not a causality letter ba, it is an association ba. What it says in other words, if you own a thing, you are entitled to its increment and you bear its risk. These are two facets of ownership. Put the ownership in the middle. On one side, if anything happens to that property, it's your loss. So you bear the risk. Ad-damanul milk. And on the other side, if any increment happens, even without a work, not at all without, completely without a work at all, you earn that increment. Again, this issue of a work or not work brings us another thing, because another point many people say that the prohibition of riba is justified by you be sleeping at home and you earn from the sweat of others. Do you buy that argument? In mudaraba, you are also a sleeping partner. You are sleeping at home and you earn from the sweat of others. By what virtue do you earn from the sweat of others in mudaraba? Can you tell me? Yes? What did you say? Guys say, no, there was some...
The ownership?
Because you own it, because you still own that property. You still own it and you gave it to somebody else on agency basis. We will notice that mudaraba, later when we reach it, includes an agency contract under it. Each mudaraba has with it an agency contract. Like a layer, bitana. Like a layer under it is an agency contract. So you are still the owner. That's other person. The mudarib, the manager, is not the owner. You earn by virtue of ownership in mudaraba. Now, in a loan, you don't earn because you don't own. The money that you give and he uses it to buy other things, that's his property. And you own a debt, and the debt does not increase. Okay? The same thing, the rule, al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. It's exactly, the meaning is al-kharaju bil-dhaman. Exactly, but this is a fiqhi maxim. يعني قاعدة فقهية, not a hadith. Some people mix it as hadith, it's not hadith. Al-ghunmu bil-ghurm is not hadith, but it gives exactly the same meaning of al-kharaju bil-dhaman. And the ba here in it again is a ba al-musahaba, not a causality ba. Ba of association, not a causality ba. Okay? Now, the next thing, if we agree on what justifies earning, then how can you earn in Islamic finance? Only by any of these three. These are really principles, because each one of them will have several contracts, which we will discuss later. But, so these are like groups of contracts, call them. Either by sale, different kinds of sale, or by lease, and again different kind of lease, and or by sharing with different kind of sharing. Notice in each one of them there is an ownership. In sale, you buy and sell. In lease, you buy and lease. And in sharing, you buy and then produce or buy other things and sell them. So there is again ownership. So in each one of them there is ownership. Now there is one thing that is not in this slide. Can you tell me what it is, please? What is not in this slide?
Loan.
Loan, right? So loan is not here. You don't earn by lending. And lending does not generate return. Lending transfers ownership but does not generate return. Now, sale generates return. Why? Because in sale, assuming that sale is done under free contracting, and you are not forced to do, would you sign any sale contract if what you get is exactly equal to what you give? You won't. Why? Then better save your energy, save the calories that you sign with. Okay, so save your calorie and don't do that contract. You make a sale contract only on that applies to the two sides. Only if what you get is at least one edge above what you give, right? Which means that there is an edge and on the other side there is an edge. Both of them earn more. In other words, sale creates added value. A loan does not create added value. A loan transfers ownership, and with ownership transfers degree of action, degree of freedom. When I got a loan of $1,000, I can go to the market and buy things with $1,000. And for the person who gave me the loan, he cannot go and buy things for that $1,000, right? So he kind of reduced his ability to take action by that much. There is a sacrifice on his part, but he cannot claim an increment from me because what he owns, debt does not create increment. Okay? So here, if he makes a sacrifice but no increment, what is the result? Someone should reward him, right? And Allah will reward him only. Because you cannot take any part from the property of other person, of the borrower. So anything you take will be taking his own property that you have no right to take. Okay. Now let's take few added conditions that are used in Islamic finance contract very often, and we will discuss these 4 points quickly. We'll give the last 15 minutes to Fakhruddin to make us that presentation of the paper that he summarized. Okay. In Islamic finance contracts, especially in sale and in leasing, very often we use this delinquency fine. Why do we need it? Because if a person doesn't pay on time what he is supposed to pay, a debtor does not pay what he is supposed to pay on time, that creates a mess for the Islamic bank. And it's so simple that any person would not pay on time, because you cannot anyway increase any amount. Because any increase you make is an interest, and the Islamic bank should not earn interest. What's the solution? The solution is to hold a gun, and if anyone who delay payment, you just shoot him. So the idea is you need something to protect you. Okay? We make a fine. Fine is very common in conventional banking. For instance, in house financing in America, they always ask for 5% extra if you delay payment. Usually house financing, almost all of it, the payment in it is monthly. And if you delay it above the due date, usually the due date is the 5th of the month, and if money did not reach to the creditor, to the bank, on the 5th day of the month, then you will have to pay a fine, 5% of that amount, minimum $50. Because nowadays there is no payment of less than $2,000 or $3,000 at least. Almost nothing is $1,000 now anymore. But they make minimum $50. Okay. In other words, what is the objective of this fine? Two things. One, to compensate the creditor because of the time, interest, and because there may be some additional cost. For instance, the delay of payment will make them send you a letter, reminder. If you don't pay on time, we will do this or that or the other. So that there was to be some compensation for this additional cost. So you have a compensation objective, and you have a deterrence objective. You need to make the fine high enough to deter the debtor from any delinquency. And you need it to be sufficient enough to compensate for the whatever cost. In conventional, they compensate for 2 things. Any additional cost caused by the delinquency, and the interest rate at that time for the time of the delay. Okay? In the Islamic, of course, you cannot take interest. Any increment in a debt is interest. And the definition of a debt is the Quran. Came from the Quran. فَإِن تُبْتُمْ فَلَكُمْ رُؤُوسُ أَمْوَالِكُمْ. If you repent, you get your principal. And now your principal, you cannot get any addition above your principal of that debt. So this is the fine. The objective of it is compensation of these 2 things and the deterrence from delay. In Islamic finance, of course, we cannot charge cost of money, meaning the interest element, that completely cannot be charged, but we can charge any additional cost. And usually we call it any out-of-pocket additional cost caused by the delay. We like to make the fine high enough to deter the debtor from any delay. So So, and of course, we cannot make it much higher than the market, because if we do make it that much higher than the market, people will go to the interest market instead of coming to us. Not everyone comes to the Islamic bank because of religion. The Islamic bank, in fact, should be very competitive with other banks. Unfortunately, in some areas, that's not the reality today, which is wrong. And there is no reason whatsoever that the Islamic bank should be more costly than the conventional bank. There is no reason. And any reason the Islamic banks give is really false, is a pretend only, not real. Okay. So here, is there any time value of debt? Time value of debt? No, because the debt does not generate any increment. It is not a property that has utility. Increment is generated by the utility, and the debt doesn't have the utility. Yes, please.
What about فنظرة إلى ميسر? Is it a directive to refrain from doing this?
Okay. Now, يعني first مش نظرة هديك تاع أحمد شوقي. نظرة فابتسامة فمدري إيش هديك تاع أحمد شوقي. فنظرة. Meaning of نظرة is إمهال, يعني period of time. Okay. Well, the period of time is done anyway because you are delayed. But how can we also protect the right of our depositors? If you don't pay on time, can we, do we have to give you more time?
It depends on your situation. If you
Well,
have
we
a
don't,
very
we don't know that. We don't know what is your situation. We don't know it, and we don't want to investigate it because that makes us interfere in your own business. We don't want to do that. So we always assume this is what we agreed, and you have to fulfill your commitment. And it's for the bank, it has many complications. The bank has to plan its liquidity, for instance. If you don't pay on time, you are disturbing my liquidity. Is it right for an Islamic bank to foreclose, to liquidate the collateral, to do all these? Yes, it is, no doubt. And نظرة إلى ميسرة is recommendation, because a person who has right has a power of right. And my right is to pay me on the 5th of the month. If you don't pay on the 5th of the month, I am entitled to exercise all the power that is given to me by the contract. So I can do it. It is recommended, yes, if I can give more time, I will. But usually in banks, I cannot. Because in banks, I have to match always my inflow and outflow. And by not giving me that, you are disturbing my inflow, and that will affect my outflow, definitely. So here, then, you may give time, and that may work on individual, sometimes, not all the time, and this is recommendation, not obligation. Yani you should notice the differences, like إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى فاكتبوه. Is this for to make any debt in writing? No, it's optional. And the option, you take it from two things here. One, the context, and two, the actual practice. Before and after this verse, the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, all of them had transactions with debt. I mean, multiplicity of reports that they had transactions with debt before and this without writing it. And they don't have writers, much of writers anyway. Most people were illiterate, they were not writing, okay, including the Prophet ﷺ. And he died and he was under debt, for instance. So if he died and he was under debt, was it written? No, it wasn't written. Okay. So the idea not every statement in the Quran with imperative verb means obligation. Some of them may be only recommendation and some of them may be merely option. Some of them definitely means obligation. Like إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله. وذروا البيع. This is why most schools of fiqh will say sale you after the adhan of Jum'ah prayer is not permissible and not valid. Yani you cannot make a sale contract after the adhan until the prayer is over. The contract is not valid either. Okay, so the point here, we want to protect our depositors. One thing which is clear, definitely we cannot earn because of that delay. We cannot earn because of the failure of another person of fulfilling his obligation. So that does not give us right to earn. It gives us right to be compensated for any loss, but not earning. By that, are we losing opportunity? Again, we are losing degree of freedom. Not we are losing opportunity, but not opportunity cost, not an amount. We are losing degree of freedom. You are disturbing our balance of inflow and outflow. Yes, and we have to seek other ways to make that balance. Suppose to while seeking other ways to make that balance, we go to the suqi and tell him he has a payment that is due to us after 15 days. We tell him, we give you discount now, give us early payment. And he accepts to do that. Suppose in that amount that compensate for that payment. Can we charge you that amount that we gave him discount? Yes, because that becomes an out-of-pocket cost caused by that delay. Okay, so any out-of-pocket cost that is caused by the delay can be a charge, but we do not charge opportunity cost. Opportunity cost, we replaced it with degree of freedom. So it's not an amount that you can charge. It doesn't exist unless it becomes reality, like this, giving a discount to another debtor to give us early payment, so we make up, we balance our inflow and outflow. Now, what do we do with this fine if we collect it? We force it to be collected. I mean, usually the text of contracts say that any payment we make after that, first we take the fine and then we apply the remainder of the payment to the late debt. So we still call you to pay the remainder of that. So first will be the fine. What do we do with the fine? Three options. Three options. One way is the contract would say, we will force you to pay through us to a charity that amount. This is one text that exists in many contracts. Another text that you pay us a fine, you pay us the fine, and in our records, through our Sharia board, we assign it to charity. And usually, wherever there is regulation from central banks, some countries has regulated this point, that the amount of that is assigned to charity must be spent under the guidance of the Sharia board. That exists in many banks, that the amount assigned, in other words, it's not the management that uses this amount at its own discretion. It has to prove, or the Sharia board has to make some guidelines for how to use this fund, and then prove that it is used for that only. For instance, in one of the banks I am involved with, we asked the management to give us the all listing and some description of the charitable organizations in the country. And then we asked people who experts in that area, which one that doesn't play anything in politics, and because we don't want to involve the bank in politics, that it finance that charity, and which one that is really true charity, giving more efficient than others. And so we kind of reduced the list to 3-4 organizations, telling the management you can only give these funds that come from fines to these charities, not to others. We reduced it to a smaller list and excluded some that we have some reservations on them through that discussion and research. So these are the two main ways that are exercised. Another way that can be done, which in my opinion is more fair, because I cannot force you, I have no right to force you to give charity, do I? So how come the bank, the Islamic bank, gives itself that right? Or to pay charity from your money. I'm taking it from you and I pay charity. I have no right to that. I think this issue hasn't been looked carefully by many Sharia boards of Islamic banks. In my opinion, the third way is better, but it can only apply in long-term financing. We credit the amount of fine to the last payment that is due on you. In house financing, it works beautifully. Suppose the fine is $100, and suppose there is no additional cost. So we take the fine and tell you this fine is credited to the last payment. Suppose the payment for over 30 years, every month is $1,000. That means the last payment will be $900. But actually, we took that 100 now. Imagine that we took it 30 years in advance. That will be a good deal for the bank, is it not? It's a very good deal for the bank. And the bank, anyway, lost that opportunity, the freedom of by not paying on time. So it is fair that the bank also uses this money as an advance payment without any discount or without anything. It's like advance payment, but it will be credited. We consider debts always at their face value, and this is at the face value. We credit $100 to the last payment that is due on you later, instead of giving it to charity. Okay, so you benefit in a sense from it, but not from the next payment. That doesn't apply in short-term financing. It applies only in long-term financing, because it doesn't make really, it loses the value of the fine. It loses the objective of deterrence. If I credit it to you to the next month payment, right? Because to you it may not make a difference really. So it loses really every month you will delay them. And I'm going to credit it to the next month. It does not make a deterrent fine. Okay? Now, third party guarantee. This issue, we will have it later again. We will come back to revisit it again. But third party guarantee is based on a very interesting principle. Now, let's see. What's your name, ma'am? Here, the first one here. Nadia. طيب. Yeah, Nadia, you have some of your properties in your purse, right? I'm sure. Maybe money, maybe your iPhone or other things, right? Okay. Now, these things that you own, you have full freedom to do whatever you like with them, right? Because they are your property. Okay. Now, suppose you have $100 here, and you decided to give it as charity to anyone. So you can do that. Or you decided to tell Fakhruddin is under debt to me. You decide to tell him, okay, or tell me, if he doesn't pay his $100, I'll pay on his behalf. You can do that, right? And you may go back to him later or not go back to him. It's up to you. You decide. Correct? Why? What does that mean? It means, you remember the principle that we discussed? What is the definition of ownership? What's the definition of ownership? Those who were with me in the first. Fahad.
Something you own?
Ownership right, what is it? It's a full, complete, exclusive authority over an asset, over goods, over an object, right? So she has full authority over what she owns, right? She can do anything with it, including guaranteeing the debt of Fakhruddin, for instance. Now, she is not his sister. Is she his sister, ya Fakhruddin? Is she your sister? No, right? And she's not part of the contract between him and me. He took a loan from me, say, for other reasons, and she wasn't part of that contract at all. That's the idea of third-party guarantee. That is based on basic human rights. Basic human rights is everyone is fully authorized over what one owns. And if you are fully authorized, you can use it to buy things, you can use it to give charity, you can use it to guarantee any person. Now, probably you may have some care about that person, or you may not have. It doesn't matter. Very often you may have some care. He is a colleague of Nadia in the class, so she cares that she doesn't want him to fall under delinquency. So she gave this guarantee. Or it may be, he may be her nephew. So again, I care about my nephew, but it's not, I'm not responsible for his living, for his action, for he's completely independent, and it's not a thing that I am part of the transactions he makes. So that is, as long as I am not part of the transactions, it is based on basic human right. That is the right of ownership. That means you do whatever you like with your property, right? Okay, we agreed that. You remember this Larry King married a girl of 23-year-old and he was 73, and he gave her a lot of money. It's freedom. He can do whatever he likes, right? Okay. So this is the, it's based then on basic human right, and it is guaranteed, can apply to the principal of a loan or to any increment also. It doesn't have to be. But does it apply only in loans? In this example, we mentioned a loan. Let's take another thing, and this is really where it applies, not in loans. Okay? Suppose I am investing with an Islamic bank. You work in an Islamic bank? Why not?
I didn't have the chance.
Okay. Who works in an Islamic bank? You do. Okay. I invest some money with the Islamic bank. Okay? And then Islamic bank is my agent. That money, $1,000, he may, it may make, the bank may make, say, a return of 5% or 6% or 10% or minus percent, right? Any of these. Can Nadia come and tell me, if you invest in this bank, you are in QIB?
No, I'm in ADIB.
Okay, yeah, you told me this Abu Dhabi.
Islamic.
But this Abu Dhabi now is making a lot of mess in the Arab world. All the government of Abu Dhabi don't like really what they are doing. Okay, so suppose that she likes that bank and she thinks it's a good bank and she wants to promote it. Can she come to me and tell me, if you put your money in that bank on investment basis, I guarantee your principal. If the bank fails, I'll give you the $1,000. She can, it's permissible. Can she tell me, I guarantee your principal and I also guarantee 5% above it? Of course we can. Because it's based on basic human right. Okay. I wrote a paper, was published in 1989 under the title ضمان الفريق الثالث وسندات المقارضة, how it applies. At that time, the paper raised, quite hot discussion and some strong objections. But once the objections died and that strong discussion died, it became the norm in Islamic finance after that. Every single sukuk that was issued had with it a third-party guarantee. Now the idea of a third-party guarantee then, it is a guarantee from a person who is not at all part, the person can be legal person, a company, not part of that contract, and it applies in areas where second party guarantee cannot apply. Now if Fakhruddin is under a debt to me, I can ask him, I wouldn't accept to give you that debt, sell you on credit, unless you bring me a guarantor. Okay? That is called second party guarantee because it is the responsibility of the debtor or potential debtor. Debtor when the debt is already there, potential debtor when I want to sell him on credit. It is his obligation to satisfy my conditions for the credit. I need good collateral, good guarantor. Okay? But in that case, we don't call it third-party guarantee. Third-party guarantee is whenever the second-party guarantee does not apply, and it does not apply in investment, in wakala, or like wakala in mudaraba, or in musharaka. So whenever the investment is on the basis of musharaka, wakala, mudaraba, the second party guarantee cannot apply because he is not required to guarantee my principal. He is only an agent and not required to guarantee any profit on it. Can a third party, can Nadia here interferes and offers me this guarantee? Yes, provided she doesn't benefit from this contract between us. So as a definition then, it's a guarantee that may apply to the principal and the and any profit. It applies in sharing and wakala, does not apply in sale, because sale requires or may require second party guarantee, not third party. And its conditions, it must be offered on voluntary basis from a person who does not benefit from the contract. So it should be independent from a person who is completely independent from the mudarib or the manager or the agent or the wakil and the principal, and must be given on voluntary basis. But the moment she gave it, suppose, and I invest with that bank, that voluntary action becomes obligation on her because I took action based on her guarantee, on the guarantee of the third party. Okay? Now the other 2 points, we'll take them next time, inshallah, quickly at the beginning. And let's now listen to what Fakhruddin Sahib is going to come up with in his paper. So go ahead,
How to use a computer?
Monsieur Fakhruddin.
Doctor, how to use a computer? Using a computer or without?
What?
It's using a computer or without?
No, why it's not? There's no PowerPoint, there's nothing. Only you tell us in brief what is your summary. It's not even, don't read it for us all.
So it's not a presentation.
It is not a presentation on PowerPoint. No PowerPoint. It's only the report in writing and maximum 3 pages. You use the font number 2. You use margin 1 to 1.25 from 4 sides, and you don't fool me with the size of the font. Okay? Font 12. Yes, font 12 always. Single space, not double space. And maximum 3 pages, including your critical comments on the paper that is given to you. And by the way, please check your papers. Anyone who has a paper less than 10 pages, it's reversed. I give you another one instead. So you are one of them. Anybody else has a paper, I send you a paper, it was by mistake. If I sent a paper less than 10 pages. Okay. So if you find yourself receiving a paper less than 10 pages, please write to me.
Doctor,
Yes.
our set date is يوم 10/2 which is
Yeah, يوم 10/2. The summary, the report is required by the end of the day, that is 12 midnight. On the date on it, on the email, should be maximum 12 midnight next Tuesday. So a week in advance is okay. It's okay to send it earlier also. You don't have to wait until then. So at any time you send it, that's fine.
no, but I mean يوم 10/2 is a vacation I think عشان هو اليوم الرياضي.
Tuesday لا ما في 10/2 ليش؟ يوم الرياضة؟
Yeah, yes.
2nd February.
Yes.
2nd February is
Second Tuesday. is fine.
or 2nd Tuesday? Well, if that happens, we are going to compensate it. Please, we will not be able to lose that much time. We will agree then on another day. 10/2 is a holiday. Well, there will be no class on the holiday. Can we make it on Saturday, the following Saturday? Agree on a time, you have a week, otherwise I'll impose a time. So if you agree on a time, you have between now and next week to agree on a date to replace that class. So we need to replace it, we cannot afford losing it. I have another occasion where I will be absent most likely. Until now it's not determined, but I may be absent and we will compensate it also. So please keep in mind.
Quiz next time? We have a quiz next time?
Next week we have a quiz. The quiz will be true and false and multiple choice. And the quiz will be only 1 hour, which is the first hour. And after prayer, we will resume our class normal. So after prayer next week, we have a class, and that will apply to the 3 quizzes. We'll give the quiz in 1 hour and multiple choice and true and false. And we will give the, after prayer, we will resume our class.
This will cover all the
Material.
It will cover, today will be included,
Okay.
next week will not be included.
Doctor,
And again, before you, we need volunteer, if you like. Are there any volunteers for the bonus for next week? You want to volunteer? Okay.
yes, but for the research, so I have to, if we're gonna postpone the lecture of my presentation, can I postpone the submission of my presentation?
Well, yes, as a matter of
Yes.
fact. Yeah.
Yes,
You
you
can
see?
postpone it within a week from the date of presentation. Should
Okay.
we make it this week or next week, the compensation? Wait a minute, this week? No, I cannot anyway. I'm not in town on Saturday. Okay, Saturday after the 10th, which will be what, about 15 maybe? Do we agree on a time? Okay, do I have give me the signature paper, where is it? Anybody not mark his or hers? Okay, thank you. So we have Safiya absent, and Mahsa absent, and Mahmoud Fahad Al-Addasi also absent, right? And Ahmed Abdul Raziq or Abdul Razzaq making like the broadcaster of Al Jazeera, this new one. Awfully, he makes so many mistakes in his Arabic language. I don't know why did they bring that person. Sometimes awful mistakes. Okay, at least in each in news broadcasting, he makes 6-7 mistakes. Unbelievable. Like the Khatib of our mosques. Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik at one time made a mistake in Arabic, in Nahu. And he hid for a full month until he learned how to talk and then came back. And he was the king of the country, of the whole land.
Doctor, will you be sending us the questions before the exam? Not the questions of the exam.
Well, this is what we need to discuss it now. Now, do I have 2 volunteers this time? You? Okay, give me your name, please.
Ahmed Diab Hassan.
Aywa, Ahmed Diab Hassan. Fine. Okay, so only 2. Each time we'll take 2. We'll take you next time. The idea, I will give you the instruction. I'll give you a sample and use please the same format and same font. Okay? And make 50 questions, about 2 pages of questions, and they should be really thoughtful questions. So please don't make questions that are obvious. They should be something that tells me that you really did some effort. Okay? I wouldn't I wouldn't calculate all your mistakes. If I am convinced that the questions are generally intelligent, I will give you the full grade. I give full grade. And if you don't convince me that they really are intelligent, you won't get a full grade. This is bonus, will add, provided it doesn't exceed 100%, of course. So I'm not going to give anybody more than 100 out of 100. Okay? But this is bonus because most likely you will make some flaws on the exams and probably the report sometimes. Okay, so I got 2 volunteers tonight. Now, for this assignment, I like it, please, maximum by Saturday. Can we make it Saturday evening maximum? So I can send you the questions. This will be included in the questions. I can send you the questions for the exam before Sunday evening. If you give it to me by Saturday evening, I'll send you that by Sunday evening. Okay? So we agree. This time exceptional, I need it by Sunday. Otherwise, we can wait until beginning of next week. Only the day Saturday. Yes, until Saturday evening. And my evening always is midnight. That is Saturday midnight. Please go ahead now and let's. I will send you anyway the exams, inshallah, the questions for the exam on Sunday, and the questions will be out of that. Okay.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'll try to reduce it within maybe 5 minutes. So,
Yeah, give us a good brief of the paper.
I have summarized a report. It was titled Conceptualizing a Strategic Framework of Social Responsibility in Islamic Economics by Muhammad Nizam Baroum from College of Economics in International Islamic University of Malaysia. The author discussed this paper under 5 subtitles. One, the introduction, and then the second, Homo Islamicus and its normative assumptions. The third one, the behavioral norms of Homo Islamicus. And fourth, a strategic understanding of social responsibility. Fifth one, finally, the conclusion of the paper. In the introduction, he mainly emphasized on the Islamic economics responsibility, the social responsibility in terms of
Do you really buy that distinction, Homo Islamicus and Homo economicus, or
This terminology
economic man, rational economic man?
this terminology is more religious than economic, because in Islamic or conventional, the economic behavior is to make maximum welfare for the society and for the individual. So
Okay.
the term Homo Islamicus, it will only make the Islamic economics more religious in the public, then it is more economic, in my humble opinion. And
Is there any difference between human rationalism and Islamic rationalism? And the way I see it, that Islamic rationalism is a larger scope that includes all human rationalism within it. So we talk about human rationalism plus human rationalism guided by revelation. So it's not really anything that is different, detached, comparable. One includes the other. To me, Islamic rationalism includes human rationalism and adds to it that another source of true knowledge,
divine
the revelation source. So I don't really feel that distinction is acceptable. To me, it's not acceptable. Okay, go ahead quickly.
Okay. And a professor asked me a question. There was any discussion on the actual the divergence of Islamic banks from its ethical behavior to a positive behavior. Positive behavior means prioritizing the self-interest on the social interest. I answered that
And
yes.
part of it is musharaka and not. This is what they claim. I don't see that at all, as a matter of fact. And honestly speaking, the issue of in fiqh, you see, many people, because they don't know fiqh, they go with these fantasies. In fiqh, they always say that exchange contracts are contracts based on shuh. ايش يعني الشح؟ يعني self interest. لا, self interest. Exchange contracts are based on self interest. Why we don't allow a young boy or a young girl to enter into a financial contract below the age of whatever age according to Abu Hanifa, the 18? Why we don't allow that? Because that person, that young person, doesn't know his or her interest well and cannot defend them well, cannot negotiate for them well. So all exchange contracts are based on the assumption that is in Sharia, that is clearly mentioned in fiqh, are based on the assumption that each person is motivated by self-interest and knows what are his interests or hers. So this is, and then you will come and tell me, oh no, this is not Islamic. Gosh, if you defend your interest, that's not Islamic. يعني the other idea, وترى الدنيا انطوت في كفه ليس منها أو في جيبه أو كفه ليس منها ذرة في قلبه. This is the difference.
In this context, the author says that in the contemporary Muslim society, the Islamic finance became a failure.
Yeah. And where is the failure? If it is increasing every year at 17 to 20%, so where is the failure?
Never. There is no failure. But there are some. We have to admit that there are some issues of non-compliances. It cannot be described as
Yeah,
failure.
of course. We talk a lot about these.
And the author again discussed about the.
You see, many people, and that you find it in many writings, think exactly like what happened in New Delhi in 2010, that Islamic banks were supposed to provide finance on mudaraba. And if they did not do that, then they have deviated from the right track they should have taken. Where does this right track came from? From their mind. Recently, in a discussion with one of my colleagues, do we have anyone Pakistani here or Indian? You are from, okay? This idea came, according to a Pakistani friend, it came from the heritage of Abu al-A'la al-Mawdudi, because Abu al-A'la al-Mawdudi mixed up between business and sale. And you find in the translation of the Quran, of many of these writers, they translate أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى instead of saying sale, that and God made business permissible and riba prohibited. Gosh, bay' doesn't mean business. Bay' means sale. They shy away from saying sale and they say business because they mean mudaraba. So this idea came really, has no base, unfortunately.
So as a conclusion, we can say that the paper concluded that a strategic or instrumental understanding of social responsibility should be outlined as or should balance between the ethical social interest motives and the self-interest material motives of the individuals in Islamic finance.
And I see a balance in a sense like what Abu Bakr, for instance, did when in Ghazwat Tabuk he brought all that he owned. And when he was asked, why are you contributing that much? And what have you left to your family? He said, I left for them God and His Messenger. So I left for them that God pledges that He will give them rizq. He will give them sustenance. He is not leaving anyone out. So, that strength of the belief, yes, it works. Yes, it does. And when this man who was talking bad about Aisha, whatever his name, what was his name? Anybody remembers? And Abu Bakr was a distant cousin of Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr stopped giving him that regular stipend he used to give him as charity. And then the verse came that أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. He said yes, and he resumed that even with the bad things that man, Mistah his name, that man did. So this is the difference. It manifests itself in رحم الله امرأ إيش سمحا إذا باع سمحا إذا قضى سمحا إذا قاضى. This is the idea where it comes. Yes, it makes life easier, it makes life more pleasant, and it makes it, yes, definitely oriented toward the afterlife. The concept of falah is necessary, no doubt about it, but that does not contradict the concept of shuh. Shuh in that sense, in the sense of pursuing own interest. And pursuing own interest is okay. It's not anything condemned in our Sharia. It is condemned in other religions, but not in our Sharia. So I think we'll stop at this point. We don't want to hold them for longer. But do we agree on a time for Saturday after the 10th? Or we leave it until next week? Let me leave it until next week. Next week we will set, if you don't come up, you guys, with a time, I'll set the time. Probably like 12, for instance, 12 or 12 to 3. 9? 9 is fine. Okay.
The summary is right? Already did it, and I have it in my email. It's right here.
I don't want hard copy.